Give me the situation that you took and based your article off of. What's the situation? And then what is kind of the legal ramifications that drew you to wanting to write about it?
Yeah, so as a practitioner in this space, I've been following the Kalshi case really closely. And Kalshi is a prediction market that operates legally in the United States. It's what's called a DCM, which means it's registered with the CFTC and it can self-certify event contracts or prediction markets. So most prediction markets, like Polymarket, is not legally operating in the United States. Polymarket actually was sued by the CFTC in 2022 and had to exit the US market and pay a fine. But Kalshi operates legally, and what the CFTC has done is try to prevent Kalshi from offering quote unquote election-based event contracts. And so all of the things you see on Twitter where Nate Silver says Polymarket has or Kamala Harris at 51%, whatever, right? Those are really high salience markets, and Kalshi has been unable to offer them. So there's been ongoing litigation for a long time, and this week Kalshi won. The judge, Giacob in the DC District Court, basically said that the CFTC's interpretation of its own rules was totally wrong. And this has led to a real broadening, I think, of the scope of what is now permissible in U.S. event contracts. I mean, the CFTC basically was saying these contracts are quote unquote gaming, and so we can regulate them. And what Judge Cobb said, and this is a little bit fine, is the contracts have to involve gaming. In other words, they have to be about gaming for you to regulate them. And so this led to a really increased scope, and I think is a really compelling point. So today, Matt Homer, who's a VC that I work with, and I wrote an article talking about the implications of this, talking about the history of the CFTC coming after prediction markets. And basically what we say is we think this could be a real watershed moment. I mean, the CFTC's regulation thus far has been what I would argue is an abdication of its responsibility. It's basically saying these prediction markets are new, we don't like them, and so we're just going to try to ban them. And what we say is, that's not right. Maybe these markets have a lot of value for American users, and instead of banning them, instead of this reflexive posture, what we think the CFTC should do is regulate them and is create an environment where they can operate legally, but in a way that the American consumer can be confident in what's happening. And right now, Polymarket, who knows what's going on under there? It's not a attack on Polymarket. I have no idea. I'm not saying that there's anything wrong there, but nobody knows because the U.S. has abdicated its responsibility to regulate it. Instead, it just banned it. And Kalshi, we know, but Kalshi has thus far not been able to access parts of the U.S. market, and now that's changed. So that's what we wrote about.
I like it.
Yeah.
Is there like a headline statement or POV the U.S. regulatory market should regulate this versus straight up ban it? Is that kind of the purpose?
Yeah,
of the
the
article?
upside is the U.S. should regulate things that it's thus far been banning. And there are commissioners on the CFTC who take this same position. If you look at the dissents that have been written by Summer Mersinger and Caroline Pham, who are the Republican commissioners on the CFTC, they have been very aligned with the position that Homer and I took, right? The position is really specifically the position of the current CFTC led by Ralston Benham. And part of the point this is so important is after this year, there's going to be a new presidential administration, and likely there will be a new chair of the CFTC. And these issues are especially important right now because this is the time in the election year to tell the leaders that we're going to elect that it's important to us that the next CFTC doesn't take the same posture that the current CFTC has.
Is there something that is hurting American citizens or hurting this industry because of the lack of regulatory oversight versus just kicking the can down the road?
There's two things. Americans aren't getting access to markets that they would otherwise be able to access. And, sometimes opponents of these markets will say there's no or negative value. But why is it for regulators to decide? Clearly, there's a demand. The American people want to access these markets, and they're not able to. I think it's paternalistic for regulators to say, okay, Americans shouldn't be able to access these markets. That's one. The other is, when you try to regulate away a market, you just create a black or a gray market. And that's really what polymarket is. Personally, I think polymarket should be legal in the United States. But since it's not, it's now pushed offshore. And now Americans who want to access these markets are doing so illegally or quasi-legally. And they don't have any regulator looking into what they're accessing. And basically that means that we don't know what's happening there. Again, it's not an attack on polymarket specifically, but when you offshore something, you lose the ability to have any oversight of what's happening there. And I think that is also a potential locus of harm for the American people from the current regulatory approach of the CFTC.